Hello, everybody. Hello, welcome to the DocFest Exchange. If you want to come and hear a fascinating, wonderful talk, do come and edge a bit closer to us here. There's plenty of room up at the front. My name's Lucy McDowell, and I work with the broadcast, games and film team at the Wellcome Trust. For those of you who don't know about the Wellcome Trust, we're a global charitable foundation, and fundamentally we want great ideas to thrive. And what better home for great ideas than DocFest, home of experimentation and creativity. Right now in this session we have, really delighted to have Dr. Stephen Smith from the University of Southern California and Emma Cooper from Rocket, who are going to be discussing a very innovative, interactive project called New Dimensions in Testimony. A few practical things. There are some wireless headphones over here for any of you at the back who'd like to be able to hear a bit more. Just grab a member of the crew and say you'd like some headphones. And there's still plenty of room at the front if anybody'd like to come and hear. And over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I had no idea there were headphones. I think that's the coolest thing. I am speaking in your ear. Hi. So, Stephen, we were struggling earlier thinking about how to define your project. I saw you speaking yesterday at Crossover Summit, and the standout thing that you said from that was that you tried to be technologically agnostic. So do you want to introduce the project, describe it, and then we'll get into a chat about it?
Yeah, sure. So New Dimensions in Testimony is a new way of talking with people who have deep human experiences, but the ability to be able to ask them questions about their lives interactively so that you talk with the video screen. When we set out to do this 4 or 5 years ago, it had not been done, and therefore there were many questions that we had to ask ourselves. And one of the questions was, so where are we going to display this and how will it be experienced? And since we were working with Holocaust survivors, those are our subjects, we knew that we were only going to interview them once, and that we were going to be making a promise to them that we would keep their testimonies in perpetuity so that future generations could interact with them. So then the question was, well, what technologies will future generations be using? And we have no idea. And so what we decided to do was focus on content. And that was really talking deeply with them about their experiences in a wide-ranging manner, and to capture them with the greatest level of fidelity that we can at the time, that is now. And then not worry about what technologies will display it on or which technologies ultimately will be interact with. And that's proved already, even just in 4 years, to be a good decision, because we were not thinking about VR 4 years ago, nor were we really planning for AR 4 years ago. But the content is completely compliant with both. So it means that we can put the individual into an environment where you can view them in goggles or in a Microsoft HoloLens or something, and still have an interactive experience with them.
That's brilliant. Have we got a clip? Should we show the clip so we can see what we're talking about? That's so awesome. It's just the thing that I've got from the project, which is a very dark subject matter, is how much joy and kind of you found points of comedy and gentle humour to pull out, as well as telling a really difficult story.
Yes, I think one of the things is that when we approach particularly violent experiences like the Holocaust, usually we come at it from a documentary point of view or a literary point of view, where we're subjected to the most brutal aspects usually of that experience, because you're trying to explain it. What I was experiencing, and the creator, Heather Mayo, who's here somewhere, was experiencing when we were interacting with Holocaust survivors, was that actually their lives are rich and complex, like all of ours, with high points and low points, and they're very, very human. So the question was, how could we get at all of that complexity of humanity through this? We also knew that while the the testimonies that we have at the USC Shoah Foundation, of which we have 53,000 life histories of about 2.5 hours each, they're kind of more of a linear, what happened next, what happened after that. Whereas with this kind of format, you're coming in it from your own point of reference. So what's really of interest to you? So what we're finding is, and what's delightful about this is, because you're asking this person 1,000 questions over 5 days, you get to those really deep and dark moments, and you get to the funny moments, and you get to the childhood moments, and the insights about what it means to be human, fully human,
Yeah, as a game designer, it felt very much like an Easter egg. So I was going to ask you if you deliberately designed that in, or was that just a natural part of Pincus's personality? It is slightly cheeky and amusing.
It's him for sure. I mean, actually, one of our he's the first one that's gone through production and post-production and is now available to interact with, which you may have seen in the exhibit behind us. But one of our other subjects is a lady called Anita Lasker-Wellfish. She's from London and has a wicked sense of humour. We had to actually persuade her not to smoke on set at 91. So basically, her version of the Holocaust is, don't give them respect. They're a bunch of ludicrous, stupid idiots, and they do not deserve respect. And by the way, I'm alive and they're dead. So let's just start from there. And that gives you a completely different approach to how you approach the history. Because now it's not about awe of the Nazis and the killing machine. It's about her resilience and who she is as a person. And what happened was, as we dug into her history, we found that she was like that when she was 14, even before she encountered the first Nazi in uniform. That was her character, and she carried it all the way through, which is actually really wonderful to experience.
It's like the ultimate fight back of, I'm not a number. I am still the person that I'm going to, and it doesn't matter what persecution you put me through, I'm still going to be the same person. I've got so many questions. I think it's really interesting the way that you've approached the project, and I wonder if you could talk about what your plans are for the future. So when I'm creating content as an interactive developer, I consider the audience first, and you're obviously going content first. But now you've kind of created a platform. What are the intentions for it moving forward?
Yeah, so the first step was to create one individual that was functional and working and demonstrate the case, which we did here with Pincus, and he's still being refined. We then decided, because our subjects are aged between 83 and 92, we'd better focus on capture. Because it's not something you can say, with a 90-year-old like Anita, who's a chain smoker, you can't say, let's plan you in for next June, because you really absolutely no idea what her state of health will be. So we actually just brought 12 survivors in over a period of 6 months, so it was a very, very intensive production schedule, interviewed each of them for 5 days, or most of them for 5 days, and canned the whole content. So now we're thinking about, what does it mean to live with this content? So 2 things are happening. One is that there's 2 pilots going on, one in the Illinois Holocaust Museum, which is a partner organization of ours, and they've been testing now for a year with audiences. And what we're learning is how it differs when you put it in front of an auditorium, where he's on an 82-inch flat screen in an auditorium, versus in a small room where there's perhaps 5 or 6 people around it, versus what happens when it's one-on-one. So there's still some user,
You're like live testing,
evaluating what's happening. But then what we're finding is some of those users are saying, so can I now go back home and do this online, because I've got so many more questions for him? So then the question turns to, so where do we want that to be experienced? Is it in a VR set? Is it just on a screen? Is it on an iPhone? All those versions are being considered. Also being considered is context. So, you don't just walk up to an individual, I mean, maybe some of us do, but I just launch into deep questions about their lives. And what we're finding is that the same applies to this, that although we know it's a video and there's lots of content there is actually a very human moment where you don't really want to go up to this individual and say, so tell me about the worst moment in your life. So actually, it seems to be that having some kind of context in which maybe he provides a little introduction to his own life story, a little, 3 or 4 minute mini doc, just so you can get started.
Yeah.
It is one of our ideas.
You spoke yesterday about use in classrooms and how you've effectively designed it. So you've got, is it 15-minute, 25-minute and 45-minute chunks of his story, and then almost the second lesson becomes an opportunity to ask questions to the story.
Yeah, so I'm always interested in, because of the way in which the archive of the Shoah Foundation is based, we've got lots and lots of content, and we're always figuring out, so how do you curate it for different audiences in different places for different purposes? So we see each of these testimonies like an archive in its own right, in a way. So the user experience in a classroom is going to be, and should be different to the user experience in a museum. One might be highly immersive and with amazing visuals that put you literally into the place, and the other one might be more about getting at specific subject matter. So structure and scaffolding and all that sort of comes into it in a classroom setting. So over the next year, we're going to be doing some, tests with this particular interview to see how we structure the experience in such a way that the students can then enter that conversation with some knowledge and with some meaningful starting points.
That's so interesting. I've got a background in children's media, and I wondered if you'd specifically designed it. So is there an age limit? Have you tried it with very young children? What's your experience of working specifically with children?
Well, one of the things we did with each interview is once the Holocaust survivor had done their first short piece about their life history, we would then give that to a group of students aged 10 to 18, randomly selected from schools in the LA area. And then what they would do, they would then come in on the Thursday of the shoot. We didn't know what they were going to ask because they'd seen the video and come up with their own questions. And then for a couple of hours on the set, the students aged 10 to 18 would ask their own questions in their own words. What you also get is a different demeanor on the part of the subject when he or she is talking to a 10-year-old. It's very different when they're talking to me or to Heather, who they see as being an expert interviewer. So you get a different tone, and we know which those questions are. So it may even be possible just to kind of put a filter on there so you can get those.
That's so awesome. Well done. I think considering the audience is such a massive part of doing any kind of interactive piece, I've kind of run out of questions. I wonder is it a good time to throw it out to the audience? Has anybody got any questions for Stephen? Has everybody seen the interactive in the Millennium Galleries? Show of hands, have you been to see it? That lady. And did you feel like it was a natural conversation? How did you feel about your experience? Yeah.
I found it really, really moving. It's almost impossible not to be upset. It elicits such a real emotion, like you immediately forget that you're conversing with a video. So I think it massively succeeds in creating that kind of suspension of disbelief. And I think it's interesting what you said about not worrying too much about future technologies, because I think actually as human beings we're quite capable of filling in the gaps. When I was a kid, the computer games were like crappy pixels, and if you could make out a face, well done. And yet you're still so engaged by it. So I think starting with the content and the stories and the human element, that's what I just found really, really powerful about it. So, yeah.
I want to respond to that. One thing which is really fascinating is we've been a little bit exercised over the last year or so about what does it mean to put this content into VR. And somebody made a really interesting observation, which is actually where we started with this project, which is actually human beings respond to this kind of content best when they're with other human beings and not in isolation. And the social learning experience of people being together, even in that little booth there, where 3 or 4 strangers actually just kind of get together, and then there's a little exchange, and then there's some group learning, is something we felt quite strongly about. And so in some respects, just to go to your point, that's why we're not too worried about how we render it or where we render it for various uses, because we think ultimately people make sense of it the best way with other people, and actually that group learning is going to be a really great way to do it.
That's really cool. Did we have any other comments or questions from the audience? No.
I've got a question. I wondered, I really like this kind of emergent approach that the content is key and that the other ways in which you might showcase it in the future don't quite exist yet. How difficult was it to convince that was something that could work on this project, or was it just, oh yeah, fine, we can do that?
No, there was one particular meeting we had, an all-afternoon meeting with the budgets that related to both, like, if you like, the bronze, silver and gold version of this. It was very tempting to go with the bronze version because the funding would have been quicker, the donors would have been happy, they would have seen something interacting before them, and it would have been absolutely no use 10 years from now. And we struggled with that because, convincing people to invest in something that did not exist and that there was no proof of concept apart from the little thing that we'd done at the highest possible level. And we were talking about 2 4K cameras, 100 cameras around the subject, a light stage. The studio costs alone on a daily basis were 10 times what doing it on a green screen with a pair of Reds would have been. So it was very, very high. And the talk about the data collection and the post-production and the rendering of all those files and the computing power and the server farms we've got to put in place to deal with all of that, because it just doesn't exist to deal with that amount of content in one single frame. We made that decision because we felt it was the right thing to do on behalf of our subjects long term. And it really has paid off. But we still actually can't process all the data because we don't have the ability to actually process all the video files in one go. But we will.
Can I ask a really filthy question about money?
Yeah.
How did you fund it? What is the intention moving forward? Have you got any plans to generate revenue from it? I feel terrible talking about money when we're talking about such a serious subject, but...
This is such a British conversation, right? It's so liberating to go and live in the States where I just thought the same sort of thing. It's not dirty to talk about money. It's really, really important.
It's about sustainability for
and
creators for me.
It's really important in the context of a human story like this where we're trying to struggle against genocide because you have to invest in it. It costs $6 million to take 12 interviews. So $500,000 per testimony. And by the way, that's where it's difficult to persuade the funders to say, hey, $500,000 for a testimony that may or may not work. So that was a lot of commitment on behalf of the funders for whom we're grateful. And two of them were from the UK, the Pears Foundation in London and the Leon Greenman Trust in London. So there we were in Hollywood doing something in a Hollywood studio, and we had funders from London supporting us, which is fabulous.
That's
actually. So we're very happy about that. Now, in terms of how one funds that going forward, we've learned a lot about it. We think we can actually probably produce content a lot cheaper than that now, because we had to build software and studios. I mean, you can imagine where to do. So the run rate will be less than that. But from a sustainability point of view, there is a revenue model associated to it. Every Holocaust museum in the world is going to need to have some form of telling this story to future generations. Between ourselves and our partner, the Illinois Holocaust Museum, we do have a licensing plan to share this content with museums around the world so that they can benefit from this. I doubt it'll make the money back, and that's not the intention. We're not for profit, but we do want to make sure that sustainability, because then maybe with some of the funding that comes in, we can get the iPhone version going, and we can get the new, AR version going, and so on.
So it's more about getting more eyeballs than more human hearts rather than eyeballs, maybe, than necessarily coining it in.
Yeah, I mean, the whole model of the USC Shoah Foundation is that we have this vast array of content in 40 languages from 60 countries around the world. It's all about getting people to engage with that content, and that's different. For example, in China. So our next interview is going to be in Chinese with a survivor of the Nanjing massacre. She's the only one alive that can actually do this right now. There's 100 survivors of the Nanjing massacre are alive. We're filming all of them in regular high definition, in 4K right now. But we will also be bringing one of them to Los Angeles, and we'll be interviewing her in Chinese. So that's the sort of extension project we want to be able to do to bring that sort of content to new audiences in their own languages.
And I suppose you're bringing a experienced team to that. So you're bringing the rig, you're bringing your knowledge and understanding and learnings from these projects, and you effectively created a platform for yourself, which I think is really smart. I think it would be interesting to understand a little bit around the agendas for the Shoah Foundation and sort of long-term goals.
Yeah, so one of the long-term goals for the Shoah Foundation is to make sure that we're sharing our content with the widest audience possible, but in a way that's appropriate for them. So keep an eye on it. We are building a fascinating, wonderful new platform which will turn what would just be a video archive into a community. There'll be a separate interface for scholars, educators, for community members and organizations. So if you're wanting to curate something for an exhibition, you've got one interface. If you're a scholar and you're writing a paper and you've got a colleague to collaborate with in Poland and another one in South Africa, you're going to be able to work in that space together. It's going to be a place where people can upload their content into the archive, so it'll be enriched by user-generated content, and it'll be an amazing place to work. So in addition to that, then we're about pushing our content out. So on the sort of top level, we produce documentaries, and that's really about driving curiosity and driving numbers. So around about 500 million people saw our documentaries last year, which is great. But then it's about, as you go deeper, the amount of time that people spend with the content is longer. And in undergraduate education, we're getting an average login time of 45 minutes in the archive, which is just unheard of numbers. And even on YouTube, the average stop time playing on YouTube is 12 minutes, which is great. So we're all about trying to capture the imagination of our audiences and drive that content out so that more people are using it in innovative ways.
I think the subject matter is so engaging anyway. It's almost like a shorthand for how to become a human being, is to kind of reflect on how horrific we can be to each other. I wonder if it has a place. Have you ever considered putting Pincus into an environment, an unexpected environment, and unadvertised as the content being as it is? So effectively, maybe not tricking the audience, but not being so open with the audience about the content.
Not done that yet, but that sounds interesting.
Because I think possibly within certain environments, like maybe Parliament or in Brussels, for instance, having like an AR version of Pincus for people to meet in the street would be really interesting. But I don't know if that's like breaking some ethics. What do you think about that?
It's a very interesting idea. I think one of the things that we really do want to do is drive people's curiosity, and engagement does that. Often when one approaches, let's just say a documentary about the Holocaust, you expect the worst, and you're not quite sure whether you really want to enter that space or not. What I find with testimony, which is different, is it's so human that you're enabled in a way. It's not so kind of invasive. And one of the things I really do enjoy about this, which is a little unexpected, is that I see this content as a place of wonder, not a place of horror. It's a little bit like the wonder of dark ocean. The deeper you go, the darker it gets, the less you can see, but you switch the lights on and there's a whole world down there to be explored and to understand. And it's a little like that as you become deeper into the human story, there is so much one can learn, not only about suffering, but about resilience and tenacity and resistance and hope and family and community and all the stuff that makes that up, that allows you to live through these experiences and come out and still be human and contribute to the world. And that, to me, is nothing short of wonderful.
Oh, it's excellent. Was there any more questions from the audience before we wrap up? Just one more question.
Hi, I really loved your project. I'm not going to ask a question about that necessarily. I'm just thinking about VR, and there seems to be. I'm just thinking about subtitles and accessibility, and I haven't seen any project here at DocFest which has any subtitles at the moment. So not just for deaf audiences, but those with a second language, English as a second language. Do you know anything about that?
It's really new territory. So within more traditional digital media, God, I love saying that. accessibility is built into the heart and soul of everything that we do and try to achieve. VR creates a different problem, and I think it's on content creators to be smarter about how they approach it. What do you think?
Yeah, so our first VR piece, other than this sort of interactive content, but just the regular VR piece, we shot in Guatemala about 2 months ago. And that was experimenting with testimony in place. So it's a woman who's talking about what she experienced in that place and how she created the memorial that exists there today. The content was collected in Spanish for an American audience, so it's subtitled. That's all I would say.
Excellent, right. Thank you very much for paying attention. Thank you very much to Wellcome Trust for inviting us. This is fascinating. And I hope you have a lovely, lovely rest of the festival. I believe Mr. Attenborough is on in the Crucible now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In the usual way, let's say thank you to our speakers.